Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords, and today I am reviewing the second edition of Wretched Bastards. I'm sorry I haven't been posting much lately, but essentially I had the whole weekend, I spent the whole weekend having a cold. It's funny because I think in 4 years I didn't have any kind of cold or flu, and then in this last month, I've had it twice, basically. But I mean, it makes sense because here in South America, it's the weather's become very cold this winter. It's the coldest winter in 20 years, but it's also fluctuating, and also, there was basically there were no colds for, I guess, since 2020 or so, and now they've come back, and so a lot of more people are vulnerable to them. So that is why I have not been making a lot of posts in the last few days. But I do have some good news. During the time of my convalescence, I hit above the 8,000 subscriber mark. So very soon, I think probably Thursday, and if not Thursday, then Friday for sure, one of those 2 days, I'm going to be doing the 8,000 subscriber live stream, where we're going to be talking about a whole variety of topics, including I have some secret insider dirt that I want to share about stuff going on in Wizards and so on. I have some various controversies to catch up on, though not that I've been lucky that there wasn't any major thing, right? There wasn't like, I don't know, the staff of the monster manual book spontaneously combusted or something, so there's nothing monumental that happened during the time that I was sick. There's Meatball. But we will be talking about a lot of different things, answering your questions, all sorts of things. Hey, you're trying to look very cute today, aren't you? What's going on? What's going on, Meatball? Hi. All right. But today, instead, we're going to be talking about Wretched Bastards. So, as you guys know, the Red Room, I want to clarify, I don't have any direct commercial relationship with them, in the sense that I don't, they don't pay me anything. They're not a publisher of mine. They do, however, host the PUNDIT FILES series in their Red Room store. The link is in the description below. So that is the one connection that I have with them that could be seen as a business connection. But they're not the publishers of the PUNDIT FILES. They're just the hosters of it, right? The publisher is Matt Hermit. And anyways, I have confidence that I won't be biased by my connection with them in my reviews. And most of the Wretched books I've looked at, I quite liked. But there are some I've liked better than others. And this is not one that is in a topic that I am as enamored with as some of the other things they've done, because they've done quite a lot of historical games. This one, however, is the RPG of low magic, dark fantasy play. Essentially, I saw somewhere, I don't remember if it's here or not, but it's like, so it's they in somewhere else they described Wretched Bastards not as a ripoff of a Conan setting, but a ripoff of those comics and magazines that ripped off Conan, right? So it's like the B-movie version of Conan, right? And that's what Wretched Bastards is, which is kind of a clever thing for them. I think it was one of the Red Room people that said it, but it was a clever thing for them to say. That's much more clever than saying that, yeah, this is like Conan, right? This is like the cheesy B-movie version of Conan that we're ripping off. But as a rule, I'm not one of these guys that is a big fan of just the like the art style. It's just these giant muscle men doing muscle things. That is not really something that I'm just not homoerotic enough to get into that. To admire someone else's buffness or something. So it's never been a thing that I've found enticing. Enticing for me, to me, masculinity is not the brute savage in the jungle who can kill a lot of stuff. It's the guy who takes the savage and makes it civilized, right? The conqueror, right? But not just the barbarian, you know. But anyway, so there's some selected filmography here of like inspiration stuff, right? And sort of things you could expect. They have made some specific rules. Obviously for this, I will mention, like all of the second edition products of the Wretched series, you need to have the Wretched RPG first, but I believe that there's a free download of it, right? So like you can use just that, and then you can get the book, and then you're good, right? Because the book, what it'll have is the specific stuff to fit the setting, whereas the main Wretched book has like the core generic rules. So you got random race rolls, additional archetypes, besides the ones that I assume are in Wretched already from the fantasy section of Wretched. And, you know, here in the system, they get, the different archetypes get perks or feats. And then there's the magic here is based on ritual performance, which is, at least I like that. You know, I do that myself with my games. You know, it's all the way from Arrows of Indra up to Baptism of Fire. There's a number of different archetypes that you can use to fit the setting. You have some basic armor and weapon tables here and costs of things, and then wanted levels, right? That's representative of how infamous and hunted down your characters are potentially, right? Like how much of a reward is on their head, basically. And then we have STDs of the Antilia setting, which is the setting that they're, which by sort of almost sounds like an STD itself, right? So there's a number of example STDs, and then some rules for like different degrees of STDs, random symptoms, harlot encounters. Of course, you need to have a good random harlot table. This is just a 1d10 harlot table. That's not how I would have done it. I would have done a generator system that would have an array of like your very basic standard harlots, and then unusual harlots, and then ultra special harlots that have special qualities, right? I know the harlot that's actually a succubus, the harlot that's a princess that is in disguise, etc., that sort of thing, right? Well, then they have harlot plot hooks, and harlot encounters as plot hooks, but again, only a 6-option table. I mean, I've got to say, I like a lot of what the Wretched people do, but you could kind of up your game in generators, you know, like there's more to be done there. Drugs, like in World of the Last Sun, High Bay. High Bay is full of magical drugs. Where is that? The Freeport of High Bay. See, there you got common drugs because you got a high random weird drug effect table, random encounters. So that includes magical drugs and stuff. So Antilla and High Bay have a little bit in common, except in mine it's openly Gonzo. Though a lot of these sound a little bit like they could totally fit in the World of the Last Sun as well. So then they start with this whole legend business, which is written in the form of fan fiction, or not fan fiction, of in-game fiction, which I always especially dislike. Then there's stuff about like the ancient races, magic. The magic system is meant to be a rare thing in this setting, which isn't, that makes it more interesting than pretty much every D&D game right away. Casting spells can drive humans insane, which is one of the reasons people avoid it, but elves can study and practice arcane arts without fear of losing their minds. There's no cleric spells. People can have alchemy or apothecary to make elixirs and such, but the dead will not rise, so that's good too. This is very much in following with like the style that I use in the context of Lion and Dragon and Baptism of Fire, right? So it's a but the setting itself is obviously quite different because this is a dark masculine magic. Wands and magic items can exist. Scrolls are just a different kind of spell. Artifacts are dangerous to use. Magic isn't magic. They're actually latent psychic abilities. You cast a spells equal to your level plus brains modifier. The table on the next page indicates what's the highest level spell that can be performed. So there we go. And then you can recover a pool of spells with rest. Magical trauma. If they roll a 1 in the same round, she uses magic, even if the rolls are unrelated to magic. If you roll a d6, if they get a 6, the character gets a derangement. If they don't get a 6, they get a temporary symptom. Sounds a little bit complicated, but it's not too bad. It's pretty straightforward. It just, I guess they didn't want to do a magic roll to determine if a thing works or not, which is what required the unusual thing of whatever, if on the same round you roll a 1, you know. Then so you get a variety of spells here. And then you have a dungeon generator. So random dungeon generators. I'm a big fan of random generators, as all of you know. And here there's traps, things found in the dungeon, what's down the corridor, what's behind the door, what's up the staircase, what's up the hallway. So this is not a... this doesn't seem to be as much a structured... like map building generator as it is a narrative generator, you could say. What the building was used for, that's interesting. Traps. Loot. This is a very good example of a bad loot table, though, right? Like you really need to work on when you're doing a random table. If it's something that is going to come up more than once, you need to have many options. And if you're going to have many options, you need to have some options that are going to be much more common than others, and that they have to reflect the place that you are finding the things in, right? So you need to be very cautious when you're building a setting to make sure that those kind of things fit, right? Like random monster tables should never just be like a 1 to 20 table of 20 different monsters, unless they're all monsters that are roughly the exact same chance of being spotted and are all roughly exactly the same, likely power level or distribution level, right? But that's not usually how you would have it happen in an environment. So usually what you need to have is some that are going to be very common, some that are going to be rare, more rare, ultra rare, almost impossible, 1% chance or whatever, right? And then, and it's the same thing with magic items, right? Like divide them by power level and rarity. Monsters and other foes, so general classification, health dice, damage dice. So this lets you randomly generate monsters. Now, see, interestingly enough, this is actually more functional than when you're talking about stuff like treasures or encounter tables, because here, even if you only have relatively small sections, the variation of having multiple tables allows you to fairly easily create variety, right? So that once you've made something with 4, 5, 6 or more tables, and you put all of that together, it means that the creature that you're creating is going to be very unlikely to be exactly the same the next time around, right? And that means that you can vary it. Now, that's still in almost every case, the more variables you have, the better it is for the uniqueness of it. But uniqueness isn't the only consideration either, because sometimes you don't want to, there are times where you don't want to put in too many unusual features. It's better to work with broad categories, right? So like something like creature type, the way they did it here is pretty good. It's all right, because these are just like a number of generic categories. And then after that, you have roll on the other tables that helps you fill in more details. So this is better. Then we have some sample creatures and adversaries. Catfolk. Where did Meatball go, by the way? She was here a second ago. She took off. She probably heard my lecture on how to make random tables too many times. So a good number of pre-made villains there. And then we get to the world of Antilla. So it's a place, an alternate reality of Earth. For simplicity's sake, there's a few connections in two versions of Earth. So they've made a number of countries that they've just kind of slightly renamed into what are in fact parts of our world, or countries that are meant to act the same way as those places, right? Some particular settings where they start out basically. So this is again very Conan-esque, right? Like, because Conan, if you know the novels and so on, and the comics and whatnot, Conan is basically supposed to be set in our world, but it's like a mishmash, right? Like that, and they're named slightly different. So, but there's like the Romans and the Egyptians and the Hittites and whatever else, the Mongols, and they're all mixed up, and they're all there at the same time, right? And it seems like that's what they were trying to do with this. So that's fine. That's in following with the with what they're claiming that they're trying to emulate, right? And which is to say bad Conan ripoffs, which are, in that sense, they're doing quite well. Right? And then we have some religions. I will admit I haven't more than kind of briefly scanned most of these, and what my feeling was that they're okay, they're all right, and there's a couple of sections here that are interesting, but it felt to me surprisingly like they weren't badass enough, right? Because you'd think usually what you have, you could have like one or two really good faiths, and then like if you're talking like Conan ripoffs, there's got to be like a whole bunch of them that are just like these horrible religions of like blood sacrifices and dark worship of evil gods and like, you know, over the top. And there's also got to be like the Crom, right? Like the over the top war guy, right? And it felt like it was all a little bit too academic in that section. Ironically, that's one place where I felt they didn't quite go fast enough. The darker side of Antilla, problematic subjects. They're talking about slavery. There's a bit of a not a defense of slavery in this book, obviously, but a defense of the presentation of slavery as a reality of a dark setting, which is absolutely correct, right? Like, I mean, you can't do a historical game if you don't have slavery, right? There were slaves in the era of Epic India, for example, right? And I mean, there were slaves all through history, especially in the Arab countries, right? For an enormous amount of time. But in almost every country until the Enlightenment, right? The only thing special about Western civilization is that it ended it, right? But you can't just, you know, slavery has to be presented as an evil, of course. And I mean, I think all through history, people knew it was evil, and then they just were like, well, but we got to do it, right? that was the problem. And then the Enlightenment came along and said, no, you don't have to do it. Oh, okay. And in fact, we'll make you stop doing it. And sexual inequality, racial inequality. So basically all this is just to say that the setting is not politically correct, which is fine and good, right? And in this case, not because it's historic as such, but because it's imitating a genre, right? So stuff like degeneracy in the lower classes. Homosexuality, which has been misspelt. I don't know if that's on purpose or not. Torture. So it's covering all of these dark topics. Fair enough, right? Then you have major characters. A large number of guys that are, I think, mostly meant to be villains. Yes, by the looks of the reading of it. And then you have nobility titles. That should be noble titles, by the way. But infamous bastards. And of course, like everything else in this game, you are definitely playing guys that are like meant to be immoral people. So they do provide a number of interesting characters, I guess. So White and the Seven Dwarfs. Random gossip table. And then there's the Seven Bastards is the mini campaign, which they recommend as the starting point of the game. And so it's you get an entire campaign section here, which I believe is the, if I'm remembering correctly, I have to admit I started looking at this some time ago, and then I paused for a while, and then I started looking at it again. So, okay. I believe that it's pretty much the rest of the book is all about this campaign. The Seven Bastards campaign. But I could be wrong. There could be something right at the back. So you get a fairly lengthy thing here, some including a dungeon and, you know, some exciting stuff here. Oh, yes, right. I forgot about this part. So there's a whole thing about a carousing section, a carousing table, which is, you know, so because you got high table from World of the Last Sun is my version of that. This one's pretty good too, though. Like, carousing tables aren't that hard to do because, I mean, I guess it depends how much carousing you're doing. Because if your campaign is focused on carousing, maybe you need a D100 table, but otherwise a D20 table probably you could get away with it, right? And there's even some regional carousing tables here, so that's quite clever. And then you have random encounters by using the Arcana of the Tarot. And then the character sheets, right? So, is Wretched Bastards worthwhile? Well, if you like the Wretched game, and you like this genre in particular, yes, you're going to like it, right? If you're looking for a generic fantasy setting, I'm not so sure about that. If you're looking for a game to run like in combination with a kind of weird or dark fantasy like, say, Chalt, Wretched Bastards might be an okay fit. You know, it would be I think a good system to lay it on if you want something a bit more than the bare bones system of Venger's Chalt. If you want to do a Conan knockoff, then yes, obviously, right? Now, on the other hand, if you're not that excited by this particular kind of this very particular type of sword and sorcery, you might find it like one to skip. It depends. It is in some ways different than many of the other Wretched stories, which are much more about, not so much about guys that are big, strong, tough guys, but that are immoral bastards because of you know, their scheming and whatnot, you know, and about kind of grimy settings themselves. Now, the setting here, parts of the what has been done with it come out really well, and then there's some parts that I like I said, maybe on the mechanical part of the generators could have been given a bit more attention, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist at that, as you might have guessed at this point. You know, like every single book I come out with now has got more and more sophisticated random generators in it, because I find that is such a blessing to a game. If you're not as obsessed with that as I am, then it might not be as big a factor for you. On the whole, I mean, I'll recommend Wretched Bastards for anyone who might like this kind of rough, tough, violent more than dark, I would say, fantasy. And I guess that's everything for today. If you like this video, please hit like. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. I'm at 8,000 subscriber now. Thursday or Friday, I'll be doing the live stream. I'll get, you know, you guys will get about a day or at least 12 hours in advance notice. And be sure to check out all my products. Baptism of Fire is still doing fantastically well, and is, was one of the #1 RPGs in the OSR category for weeks now. And check out all my other products, you know, Heirs of Indra, Star Adventure, World of the Last Sun. Be sure to check out the Red Room. Check out, if Wretched Bastards doesn't sound quite right for you, there are other books that they've done, like, you know, Wretched West, Wretched Belle Epoque, Wretched Space, and they all have this kind of element of like this kind of morally questionable role play, but you could also kind of ignore that. But what they do have is this kind of noir style, right? That is a European noir. It's what I call spaghetti punk, right? Like after the spaghetti westerns that were made in Italy. It's that sort of thing. And you can check it out in their Red Room store. And while you're at the Red Room store, check out the Pundit Files. The latest issue of the Pundit Files is now out. It's called The Great Firebird Hunt. And we've had some very good reports about it so far. It's a sandbox adventure that you can play. You can probably play it with Wretched Bastards, actually. You know, it's about people going into the woods to try to hunt down a magical bird. And it's actually a very dangerous session if characters aren't too careful. So be sure to check that out. Check out the earlier products too, like the Slavic tree of the Slavic tree of the universe, or the Slavic world tree. That's it, the Slavic world tree, or the Merry Men and Sherwood campaign. All of those are previous issues of the Pundit Files, and there's like 15 others. So check them all out. Every single issue of the Pundit Files costs only $3.50. So if you could get someone to give you $3.50, you can buy yourself for $3.50 a Pundit Files issue. Be sure to check that out and all my other products, and we will see you guys in a couple of days. Currently smoking. This is Nerup Acorn plus Argento Natural.